Tucker Carlson said the exact same thing, that he had basically full editorial
Didn't Tucker
privilege.
get fired for having an opinion that went outside of the narrative of Fox News? Isn't that why
No,
he
Tucker got fired because he almost cost Fox News $1 billion for lying on air. It's funny that you defend the fact that he had an original opinion. What you're actually defending is misinformation and lies, which is supposed to be something you guys are against, I thought.
Which opinion was this? That's not what I heard. Tell me, please educate me, Destiny.
The Fox News, the Dominion lawsuit. There were texts that were leaked from him where he admitted that he was lying on air about claims that Sidney Powell had made to him, and he was tired of lying to his audience about things about the Dominion voting machines being rigged.
Well, I don't know if that's a lie at all.
You don't know anything because you don't read any media. That's why you're out here saying things like they get marching orders from everybody. You don't know how any of these media companies are structured. You don't know where the teams get their information from. People that work in media are the most like social media hungry people in the universe. You think that all these people in all these networks across all these countries are getting fed the same marching orders and nobody's leaked anything, nobody's complained about anything, nobody's said anything? And why do we think that mainstream media is any more insulated from these problems than alternative media is? You guys will make fun of the marching orders from mainstream media, but I bet every single alternative media guy in here is anti-vax, thinks COVID came from a bioweapons lab, thinks that Russia has a right to invade Ukraine, thinks that all the charges against Donald Trump are made up, thinks that we shouldn't be supporting Israel. Like, you guys have literally copy-pasted the same opinions between every single one of you, and you guys are talking like an army of NPCs about how the mainstream media gives you like fabricated opinions. Like, it doesn't even make sense.
Yes, we do all think the truth. That is...
Oh, crazy how truth can be a perspective there, huh? But when you all think the same thing, it's not a conspiracy, but when the mainstream media does, it is a conspiracy. Crazy how that works.
I just said that different state-sponsored broadcasters would have conflicting points of view.
But they don't. Do you watch any media? Have you followed any media?
Course,
they don't typically have conflicting opinions. When you're reporting on international media, the stories are more or less the same.
And a BBC segment, they often directly conflict.
No, very rarely. On the facts, no. Maybe if you're watching a pundit or you're reading op-eds, they will. But if you have any amount of media literacy, a really great example that works against your Israel stuff, by the way, was the reporting of that Al-Alasi hospital bombing, where everybody was saying that Israel bombed that parking lot. Every single mainstream media outlet in the world ran with that story for 2 days. I mean, how did that work if Israel controls the media? Or how does that work if they all give conflicting accounts and reports? It's because they don't. It's because everybody relies on, like, people that are reporting on the ground. It goes through their media teams. They publish what they think is right. Sometimes people f up. But there doesn't have to be a top-down conspiracy to explain why.
The sure did change the headlines very quickly, Destiny.
Yeah, after more information came out. Yes, sir, that's how it works.
When fake news came out.
So naive. Like in Iraq,
maybe people
right?
just
they
get
learned
stories
there were no
wrong.
Weapons of
Maybe
mass destruction
it's
in
possible
Iraq.
because it happened on the other side too. How many people were saying, "Oh, there's no way that Russia's going to invade Ukraine"? That's bull. U.S. intelligence must be lying because Nick said that they lie about the intel all the time. Well, guess what? That happened. Oh, well, there are no fighters in Al-Shifa Hospital. That can't possibly be the case. Oh, whoops, we found CCTV footage that shows otherwise. People get things wrong. Some people lie. Like, you have to be intelligent enough to call out fault. That wasn't even a syllogism. No, that wasn't even a syllogism, Dick. Listen, people get things wrong sometimes. You have to be more intelligent. You've got to be more sophisticated when you go through media, and you have to understand sometimes people f up and they get it wrong. Sometimes people do lie, but why the f do you trust people who in alternative media who are like teams of like 1 to 4 highly ideologically driven people versus entire media conglomerates that are being fact checked or have like, dozens or sometimes hundreds of workers in some of these offices? Like the ability for you to lie about something is going to be way higher.
I often don't hear people like you and Ed and Brian digging into the history of the national intelligence state directly influencing media.
Because history is different. Like, if you want to talk about U.S. foreign policy between like the 40s and before the the fall of the Soviet Union, that's going to be a different type of foreign policy, a different approach than our foreign policy over the past like 34 years. Also, the ability to sneak or hide different things is going to be different when everybody is carrying around a video camera and a recorder. Like, the ability to do things covertly is a lot easier back in the day when people were typewriting to each other or.
I have to go. I have to go. So I want to ask.
Buried. Yeah, do your thing, Andrew.
Sorry, brother. I have to go. So I just want to ask a really quick question. Destiny, I want to understand your worldview because you and I have a different worldview, it seems, especially on girlfriends, etc. But we won't go down that path. Do you think it would be prudent and professional for a country to allow its state broadcaster, which speaks to its populace, to report whatever it wanted and whatever it discovered without any kind of moderation or input, even if it was directly adverse to the goals and aims of the national security of said country or the military-industrial complex of that country? Do you think they would allow the state broadcaster to just report whatever it wanted fairly without anyone telling them what to say or any narratives to hold, even if it's directly counter to the interests of very powerful entities within that nation? Do you believe that we operate in a world that fair?
Yes,
Do you
because
think that would be prudent and professional?
yes, because confidence is a valuable thing. And if your country doesn't trust you, it doesn't trust the media, if it doesn't trust the leaders, and if you've got ways to hold them accountable, like via voting, then yeah, if you around with your population and people find out, you're going to be held accountable for it. Arguably, that's why Trump won his election. You know, you can say that like, oh, well, the media lies to everybody and everybody lies to everybody. That might be true. Fine. Then why the should we believe anything any of you guys say, right? At that point, you're in an epistemic, nihilistic black hole of nothingness where you can't believe anybody.
The fact that you believe a country X, will have military aims, it will have agricultural aims, it will have political ambitions, it will have trade aims, whatever they are, to compete in this globalized market, and they need their population to believe a certain point of view to be as competitive as possible against the other nations, and they're just going to allow their state broadcaster to broadcast whatever they want, even if it's counter to their own narratives and interests, is so ridiculously naive. That's not what happened.
It's not naive. You don't even understand how markets work. You know what naive? No, hold on. Naive is thinking that companies with a market cap of $100 billion have more say in our government than like
the Daily Mail starts talking about war with Russia in the UK only a couple months ago. Endless war with Russia, conscription, how it needs to happen on a dime. All of the BBC, all of the British news starts talking about how important it is to go to war with Russia, because that's the aim that they had from their military industrial complex. And the broadcaster and the media arm of the government works directly with their foreign policy aims. It's all directly going together. Not a single newspaper printed, "This is dumb shit. Nobody should go to get their ass whooped by the Russians." Not a single one, because they are not allowed to.
If that's the case, then why didn't Trump shut down all negative media about him when he was president? If that's the case, why didn't Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden or Barack Obama shut down all negative media about them? You guys bring up the best counterexample to you is that Hunter Biden laptop story. Why did that get censored for one day? Why wasn't that story completely killed?
Wasn't heavily suppressed.
Yeah, no, wait. Why wasn't that story killed completely? That is the most talked about story. Your example of media censorship is like the most talked about story in the past 10 years of online media.
It's talked about online on social media, yes, but it was suppressed in the MSM, which is the exact point.
No, it was suppressed on Twitter. No, the New York Post story, the big deal about that, the big deal about Twitter was, the big deal about the New York Post story was it being suppressed on Twitter and Facebook, but it came back in like a day. So the question is if the government, was able to control things so well, why didn't they shut that story down completely?
Destiny, let me ask you a question on that. Isn't that because they censored it because there was a specific reason to do so? Because the reason you censor it is because you want the election to go in a certain way. Once the election's over,
agencies tell them to do that? Didn't the intel agencies tell them to suppress that?
No, if you actually read the Twitter files, I know how much you hate reading. If you actually read them, experts. No, they didn't. No. Nobody told Twitter to censor the New York Post story. They literally leaked the emails where they talk about censoring the story. I don't know why you guys say the intelligence agencies told them to do it.
So all of the mainstream media all ran with "this has been debunked," and they all cited the letter that came from the National Security State, which was signed by 51 intel operatives.
They didn't say that it was debunked. They said it looked like Russian misinformation. Which, if you're honest, it did. But it did.
They started all of their articles with that statement in order to frame it.
No, it's not even remotely the same. It looked like a fishy story. Any honest actor, like, I'm pretty sure at this point we all know the laptop story is real, but even looking at it, it's
like that is a story.
Yeah, obviously. I'm sorry. Hold on. The idea that Hunter Biden dropped off a laptop years ago to like a blind computer store owner, yeah, that is a sensational story. That sounds like bull. It still sounds like bull. Even if it's true. But again, like, the deep state has so much control sometimes, like censoring stories, but it couldn't have prevented the New York Post from publishing it. Why? It couldn't go and like take that hard drive out of Giuliani's. Giuliani had balls. Oh my God! So it only takes one journalist to shut down the entire. Also, by the way, like a quasi-mainstream media journalist. This is the New York Post. It's not like we're talking about like a small YouTube channel or something, right?
Listen, I have a question. I'm curious.
Okay, go, Andrew.
I'm curious. Do you believe that in China, the state broadcaster can just broadcast whatever it wants and whatever it discovers, or do you believe it has to work within an official narrative from the government?
In China, I think they probably have to work with official narratives within the government. This media probably works closely with the state.
And what about in Russia?
Yes. For publications like RT, yes.
Saudi?
I don't know as much about Saudi media, but that would be my assumption. It's a total monarchy, yeah.
But in the West, not at all, 0%, right?
Well, it depends on the country you're talking about. Like the BBC gets state funding. I don't think they get state direction. PBS gets state funding. I don't think they get state direction. I think in general in the West, I don't think the media tends to operate at the behest of the state. Whereas like in monarchies or dictatorships, you tend to operate more with what the state is telling you to do. Yes.
Well, we could ask why you'd get state funding without state direction. That's one question. But so you're
because of legislation from Congress that authorizes state funding. I mean, it's not really a huge conspiracy.
Of course, yeah, they just give money for nothing. Yeah, fine.
Money for I'm sorry. Do you think the most wealthy broadcasters work for PBS and NPR?
I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. I
know you don't.
I want to try and get to the end of the point, especially because I'm driving. So, do you think that would allow a country to be competitive, considering that you need to have narrative control over your populace, and that we now know, and everyone in the West accepts, that China has narrative control over its populace via the state broadcaster, as does Russia, as does Saudi Arabia, as do all these other countries, and that having a news broadcasting apparatus which told the truth, even if it's against national security interests, would not allow you to be competitive as a nation state? Do you think that we're going to allow that to happen just because we care about truth so much?
No, because the West doesn't run the world because they dominate the narrative. The West runs the world because they dominate it militarily and economically. People don't like the United States because we've got the most bought and paid for media. They like the United States because we have the strongest navy that guarantees the most free passage through water. Because when the Houthis start firing missiles at people, it's U.S. destroyers that show up and save the waterways. They like the United States because we are a massive trading partner. We have the highest GDP in the world at this point, and we buy and sell goods like crazy. That's why people like us, not because we poison our media, but because we actually put out good results. You can't control the media. You can't media frame the way out of like horrible participation in a world economy. You just have to like actually be able to put up the numbers.
No, I don't think you understood the point I'm asking, because America as a country is in competition with other nation states, right?
No, but we don't compete on who can control the narrative. That's what you do on Twitter and YouTube. We compete on who has the highest number of exports. We compete on who can facilitate like the largest like multilateral trade deals. We compete on who can guarantee safe passage through waterways. When people start blowing each other up, whose military is going to show up to make sure that your ships are safe? Those are the things that we compete on.
Cool. Understand. So you think that America has no vested interest in controlling the narratives that its own population believes in, although the CIA spends basically unlimited money ensuring that vested interests are installed in every other nation state around the world.
If you
don't care about their own at all.
Yeah.
They don't care about what Americans think at all. They just care about all the other countries think. Yeah,
if you think the CIA spends unlimited money, it's because you don't know what unlimited money looks like, and you have no idea what the scale is between like CIA spending and spending of companies like Facebook or Apple or Microsoft or Amazon. Like if you guys at least were to come on and say things like, I think that all of our foreign policy is being ran by the people that control like Apple and Facebook, that would at least make sense. But by companies that are worth, like tens of billions or like $100 billion? No, absolutely not. And also, no, the reputational hit you would take in a democracy where you elect your leaders and people catch you lying about stuff or fabricating stories or controlling the media. No, I don't think you.
Them lying. We never called them lying.
Is this supposed to be a death sentence?
Nobody ever said. Hold on. Nobody ever said. Nobody ever said they never. Nobody ever said. Nobody
influence other populations, but they have no interest at all in influencing the minds of their own populace. No, they just care about trying to influence everybody else's with their democracy and all the garbage they're doing when they're pushing it. And you're saying they don't control the narrative, which is also another rabbit hole we need to go down to.
I mean, technically, your story isn't even contradictory. Even if I let you have that, because technically Americans don't really give what happens in other countries as much as their own. So you could get away with influencing other countries more than your own. Yeah, of course. But the reality is that like if you get caught doing these lies, you pay huge repercussions for it. Like a lot of the country's politics
for COVID.
What have they
paid for COVID? What have they paid for the Vietnam War? What have they paid for the weapons of mass destruction
the media
in Iraq?
coverage for the Vietnam War was harmful to U.S. institutions. That's one of the reasons why we left Vietnam. If we controlled the media, we would have stayed in Vietnam until we saw it through. Media pressure was one of the reasons we left. Look at how unpopular the Iraq War became. You don't think Obama wanted to take a more active role in the Middle East? He couldn't because the American public hates everything in the Middle East after the Iraq War. What are you talking about? Yeah, American public heavily influences our capability of operating in different theaters of war. After Iraq and Afghanistan, we have no appetite for it.
Okay.
I appreciate that, Destiny.
All right, bye.
Remember to hit that like and subscribe, and don't forget the notification bell so that my videos show up right in your feed.